Hey, this is JV, and welcome to the Elite Mark Order podcast. Today we're going to be doing a year in review, and I am here with Cosmic Scott, and he's going to help us run through the agenda today. There is a ton to talk about.
And what a 2022 it was. Holy crap, probably one of the most important years in wrestling ever, if you think about it. And that's just for
Yeah.
AEW, let alone the industry itself, which we won't talk about.
Right, right. It was a crazy year, and I think with AEW, one of the big things this year was they lost so many stars for so much time that it really changed plans. I don't think anybody. If you go back and look at the predictions people made at the beginning of last year, I don't think anyone predicted anything close to what happened this year. There was just so many injuries. There were suspensions with all the top talent missed time, and you know Tony was able to hold it together. Well, working on other stuff like Ring of Honor, and the pay-per-view numbers didn't really suffer that much, but it was certainly a crazy year.
You got to look when you're talking the injuries. This is the whole depth of roster. The whole reason that Tony hired all of these people was so in case something like this happened, he wouldn't be as affected. You're talking injuries to the top stars while they're holding belts with Punk. You're talking people leaving like Cody. That was my number one for the year was Cody himself leaving the company. That was huge. That was landmark. And it showed next man up philosophy. When somebody got hurt, when somebody's suspended, when there's something else going on that prevents blizzards, that keep people from being able to wrestle, the next man is able to step up, take care of business, and they still have a compelling show. And that goes to TK's depth of roster, which he only continued to build in 2022.
Yeah, he continued to make additional signings, and that checkbook is still open for other talent. We'll get into, I think when we start talking about our predictions for next year, we'll talk about some of the potential talent that
Mm-hmm.
might show up. But yeah, Cody leaving was huge. I don't think anybody saw that coming. He trashed WWE so much. I mean, who in their right mind would have thought that Vince McMahon and Triple H would welcome him back with open arms? I mean, he went all out ripping on WWE. He wanted a war. The Elite did not want a war
Nope.
because the Elite wants to keep that door open. Well, I guess that door is open even if you are trying to start a war. So
Well, the thing is, Tony and the Elite, specifically the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, wanted an alternative. They wanted something different. They wanted a non WWE product to be viable and to be huge. Cody had a chip on his shoulder. He's the only former WWE star that was in the Elite that was there that was an EVP. He wanted to prove something to Vince and company, and he did. He proved he's a star, and he immediately left, went back to WWE to capitalize on the fact that he was a star and he wasn't happy as a vice president. He didn't like his backstage role. He didn't like what he was doing, all the responsibilities, and then having to be a top tier wrestler, not being able to challenge for the belt, the top belt. He wrote himself into a corner in AEW, and he had no way out, so he went running back to WWE the only way he could. But that he returned as a star. He came back with all the accolades. Now that Triple H has taken over, there's plenty of people who are going to be chomping at the bit to go back to WWE under the wing of Papa H. So Cody's not the first. He won't be, or Cody's the first. He won't be the last. But he was different. He wanted the war. Nobody else wanted the war. He went back anyways because he's also the only one that was ever in WWE for any real length of time.
right, right. I think I think if you think of like three kind of ground shaking events for AEW, one was Cody leaving,
Mm-hmm.
being one of the founders. Two was Vince McMahon stepping down as chairman and Triple H getting put back in charge of creative. Half the guys in AEW left WWE because they were either let go or they didn't like the creative direction under Vince.
And
And
it
a
was
lot of
all
those
about
guys,
Vince, not Triple H. They still love him.
right, a lot of those guys loved working for Triple H and NXT. So
Mm-hmm.
when that transition happened, there was a lot of people wanting out,
Yep.
people trying to get out of their um, contracts. Malachi Black wanted out. He wanted to go back and work for Triple M. We've already seen, Steve Regal has left to go back. So there are still people who probably would be interested in going to work for Triple H again. That might even include, I don't want to get too far into the predictions yet, because I think we'll close with those, but I mean, that could
Yeah.
include FTR. So,
Well, let's talk about that when we get there. But speaking of arrivals, in 2022, you have the entire ROH roster. You have that big purchase happening. And then on that heels, you had Regal arriving, the Blackpool Combat Club forming, and all of that potential. And then immediately you follow that up with somebody like Claudio being signed and joining the Blackpool Combat Club. And you have all of that in the mix in 2022. And then it just sort of went nowhere. You know, the ROH purchase, everybody was excited, and it sort of dragged around and it diluted AEW for a while. And I think Blackpool Combat Club got drowned in that because Claudio and Yuta were a big part of pushing ROH, the never-ending feud with the Jericho Appreciation Society and the Blackpool Combat Club drug that entire thing into the mud, and that's all covered with ROH now. And even the executives were like, we don't want Jericho to have the ROH title. It's a waste of Jericho for him to have that title. They didn't want the TV show, and so they pulled it from Jericho, put it back on Claudio, put it back on Yuta, where, you know, Tony was like, hey, we've got Jericho. He's going to get eyes. Warner Brothers didn't care. And so that whole thing, yes, Regal coming in was fantastic. And there was so much going on. And then it just sort of petered out. And then Regal left 8 months. No time at all. Gone. 2022 showed up, did a couple things, out.
Yep.
That is crazy that could even happen. The only reason Tony let him is he said for the next year, no camera. Just don't be on camera. Right. Okay. Not even a true no compete clause. Just don't be on camera. Hell, Renee Paquette had a 2-year no compete clause.
Yeah.
So huge things. And I absolutely cannot believe how it dragged on with the Jericho Appreciation Society and Blackpool Combat Club. My God, could they just finally end it? And I think they did, but it didn't help anybody in either group. Let's be honest.
I think Jericho versus Blackpool was really one of the most important cogs in the AEW machine for the year. If you go back and look at the match listing for the year, like the highly rated matches by fans and by critics, Jericho appears probably more than anyone else.
He gets a lot of TV time, yeah.
He does. And he was super important to AEW this year. I think a lot of people are sick of him, especially the more hardcore IWC people. It's like, come on, we want to see someone fresh. But you know, Jericho had a health scare in Europe this year, blood clots or whatever it was, and he lost seemed like he lost 50 pounds overnight.
Yeah.
And got, chiseled for a guy that's in his mid 50s almost.
He's the same age I am. He's like 52, 53. So when I look over at him and go, wow, yeah, he looks great. Yeah, he absolutely does. And he is a pillar of the company. There's no question. Look at what he did with Action Andretti. What a premiere that kid had. But
yeah, that was a great moment with Andretti getting the upset. It's a lot of times in matches like that, you'll kind of say, call the audible, Tony, call the audible, because there's no way Jericho's going to lose. And sure enough, Andretti goes over.
But that was the plan going in. There wasn't even an
Yeah, it
audible.
wasn't an
That was Jericho scouting him a few months ago and saying, "Hey Tony, I want to work with this kid, put him over," and he did.
yeah.
It was a phenomenal match. Andre, they got the crowd into it. It was great. I'm not saying Jericho's bad. I'm saying the feud between Jericho and
Right.
the Appreciation Society against the entire Blackpool Combat Club dragged. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, I love everybody in it. I think they're all great. They all had amazing matches. But the feud dragged, and it still feels like they're trying to linger on it, and I hope they don't go back to it. I hope they are done with it.
Well, Jericho said he was done with Blackpool, and he said Sammy still got some things he wants to take care of, with Garcia. So I think we're still going to see Garcia and Yuta fighting, and maybe Sammy and some of the other guys, which is fine. I mean, I'll watch Sammy fight anyone in Blackpool, and it'll be the best. It'll steal the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's like we've seen some criticism lately where Tony's like, well, I hear fans complaining that two people are fighting each other and they don't have a story. Um, fans complaining that there's no storyline for the matches. Well, this Jericho Appreciation Society versus Blackpool, with each faction having 5 members or whatever it is, provides an indefinite amount of matches for Tony to have. That also comes with storyline because these factions have been feuding. So I wonder if that might play into it because he doesn't like complaints. And I don't know. To that, I say don't listen to someone who says you can't have matches without a story. Like wrestling's supposed to be based on competition, fighting for the title. The only storyline you need half the time is who's fighting to be better to move up the rankings and get the title shot, or who's the better man, who's going to retain the title, who's going to win the title. You don't need someone pissing in someone's Cheerios to in order to have a match. It's like part of wrestling is competition. So I would say, it's great to have storylines. Storylines are great. Like the Punk MJF storyline earlier this year and the interviews they had and the back and forth from week to week. That was some of the best storytelling I've ever seen in wrestling ever. But at the same time, you can have a Takeshita versus Mox match that tears the house down, and they don't need a reason to fight. They're just fighting to see who's better, to see who's the top guy. So,
And while all of that is true, I think there's a level of story that can exist. I think that I just hope that the Jericho stuff and the Blackpool Combat stuff isn't forefront. Let it simmer. Let it be in the background. Let it come up every now and again. Sure, they can still pair off, but they didn't pair off. And it's still, they had their big matches. They had blood and guts. They had this, that, and the other thing. And yet it still feels like it was dragging on because they kept fighting each other and kept fighting each other as a group and as the big names, not necessarily the tag teams going at it, not necessarily the mix-up that you were talking about. So I think that's why a lot of people are kind of done with that feud. There's enough faction, enough different factions. Let's move on and let's try some other factions. That's really all I'm saying.
yeah, and I agree with you. I'm tired of the feud. It's definitely gone on too long, and I just hope Tony doesn't make decisions like that based on pressure from trolls online saying there's no storyline. I just don't want to see him yielding to trolls and idiots that don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I think he's got enough of on. You got look at how he uses Twitter. I think he's internet savvy. He's grown up with it. He's a millennial. He's not unfamiliar with technology. I think he understands trolls versus real fans, and. Yeah. He's been trying to play to the fans for a while. He is a fan. I think he knows the difference. Now, for my list, what's next after the Blackpool Combat Club that really came to mind was Hook and Danhausen with Hookhausen, which showed up for like a week. But that was memorable because people were like, yes! And then nothing came from it. Now Danhausen is over with Best Friends and Hook won the FTW title, and now he did his thing with Action Andretti. I'm not really sure where they're going with this stuff. Those two are still incredibly over, but then Tony doesn't do anything with it. So it's memorable because it happened, because they're young, and it was exciting, and it was fresh. but it's not memorable because what the hell did he do with it? Where did it go? What was the point?
Hookhausen was topping the merch charts. I mean, people are wearing Hookhausen gear at the shows. It's obvious that they're popular. Why did they split them up? All I can think is, Taz or Hook, they weren't happy with the direction of Hook heading towards a comedy gimmick or a comedy role. So I guess they just didn't like him with Danhausen for that reason. And they want Hook to be more of like a serious shoot fighter. They don't want him goofing around, passing chips around with Danhausen. So I think that's why they split it up. They just didn't want Hook to be part of a comedy act. That's all I can think of.
It makes sense. It's more logical than anything else I could think of. And Hook with the FTW title, his last interaction with the firm, maybe he actually fights and feuds with the firm and breaks them up, and they go off and do something else, because there are a couple of shining stars. Stokely Hathaway with the "You Raggedy Bitch" got over. People
Right.
love him now, and he's proven he's got good promo skills. He was the one Punk wanted to work with. So, maybe there'll be something with the firm. Maybe they'll break up. Maybe. I don't know. I do know that the Guns are not over, and they're a great comedy bit. Sure, they're mid-card at best, but I don't really care. I don't really
And they
care.
just beat FTR.
Yeah, they beat FTR, but again, that was in storyline. FTR was so beat down. They had okay, great, storyline loss. The Guns win. Yay! So what? Right now, nobody associated with the firm do I give two shits about. I just don't.
Right.
And Stokely is funny. He had some great lines. Maybe something will come of it, but they I don't know. They've got the firm, which is really leaving me lukewarm. They've got the Young Legends with Swerve Strickland or whatever, and that really did not hit very well. And then they got the Trustbusters, which lost Parker Boudreaux. And I don't even know who the hell. Ari Daivari's wrestling for a $300,000 prize. What is going on with them? Who knows? Who really cares? So TK really has got the upper card he can do really well. It's that lower mid card and the low card, the undercard, where he really is losing the threads and he's not building them up very well. Yeah, the Acclaim did well and the Pillars, and every now and again one will bubble up, and that's great. But I think Matt Hardy is doing a majority of the work. Sean Dean's doing a majority of the work behind the scenes on the YouTube shows, on Dark and Elevation. And I think if they could just continue some of those threads into Dynamite and Rampage and build those lower card feuds as much on TV, I think we would see a lot more of the reasons and rationales. Like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did Hook and Danhausen stop teaming? Maybe there'd be a good story reason they could play out for 30 seconds or something, if only they had played through with it and gotten to the point where people are like, yeah, let's get an answer. Who knows? But
yeah, I've always been a big proponent of writing guys off and on, using storyline to do it. I mean, if someone's going to be out for 2 months because they got banged up, then have someone beat them up. Now when they come back, you have a steaming hot angle, an exciting return, as opposed to, is Tony just shelving this guy because he doesn't have anything for him for creative, or is the guy hurt? Like, we don't know.
Right.
So, I mean, I am 100% behind the fact that if someone's hurt or someone's going to be out, turn it into a storyline and make a revenge angle with it, instead of just leaving the fans hanging. I mean, how many people go on Twitter and bitch that Miro's not fighting or whoever, and it's because there's an injury we don't know about, or it's because they're taking time off to be with their kid. It's like, why? It's like we're watching an episodic TV show, and you expect the characters to be consistently booked, just like in any other programming. So I mean, if you have a TV show about a football team and you have a star quarterback you've been building the show around for 6 months, you don't just write them off and replace them with someone else and have no explanation for it. Like no one would go for that. I think wrestling should be treated the same way, with more transparency around guys why guys are out and working in the storyline. Because a lot of the angst, a lot of the stress from fans is when there's people they want to see who are just not on TV, and we're watching guys we don't want to see, like
The
you picked
guns.
on Jay Lethal or Jeff Jarrett. We got those guys main eventing shows.
Well,
Um,
again, Jeff Jarrett has some background. He has some stroke, as it were. So he's getting some TV time because TK does that. Okay, here's some TV time. Can you get in with my crowd? I don't have an issue with that. And by the way, you were talking about football and replacing the quarterback and not having an explanation. You never watched the TV show Blue Mountain State, did you?
no, I've never heard of it.
It's basically it's a semi-comical party football school, and they literally replaced the quarterback mid-season. And there's background reasons for it, but the fact is they replaced the main character because he was the quarterback of the football team.
Okay, but did they explain in the show why, or did it just happen without that?
It just sort of happened.
Okay.
It's just because you brought up football that it clicked that
Yeah.
Blue Mountain State actually did that. And
Okay.
it's not a real football team, but a real football team has people get injured, yes. But sometimes outside of the field, they get into an accident or into a DUI or arrested or what have you. And the next
Yeah.
week, they're not on the field and the team doesn't talk about it. But, because it's real life, people find out. So there's extenuating circumstances. However, I would love to have more stuff happen on camera to explain things. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, for me, one of the big memorable moments that I'm never going to forget is the Acclaim have arrived. They literally filled in their catchphrase. During a match, they arrived in AEW, and the fans stole a chant. They stole the Keith Lee Bask in His Glory and gave it. They bequeathed it to the Acclaimed and Oh Scissor Me Daddy Ass or Oh Scissor Me
Right.
Daddy.
Yep.
And that's it. That's the moment that they switched and became the biggest act in the company. Now, they are still the tag title champs. They're still doing well. They're over. Probably still the biggest act right now. I just think AEW needs to get them out on the camera more. I know they're in every week. They need more time. They get the big pops. They're the stars right now. Let them shine. They took over, and then the next opportunity at Arthur Ashe at a big show, they gave him the title, and deservedly so. The Acclaimed have arrived in 2022.
It's kind of crazy how that all panned out. How you go from Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus.
Mm-hmm.
We're having excuse me one second. Jurassic Express was having a really good tag team run, and then you had the Bucks and the Hardys, and that was supposed to be the big act, was the Bucks and Hardys, and there was going to be a big feud between them, and everyone was going to go crazy, and Jeff Hardy got his DWI. They gave the Bucks the title, and then the Bucks inexplicably lost to Keith Lee and Swerve, who everyone thought would have broken up already. So Swerve and Lee win the tag titles, and then they have a program with the Acclaim that, I almost don't want to say it, but that elevated the titles and made those tag titles more interesting than what the Bucks and the Hardys would have done. Those four guys have just done an incredible job. I think the match at Chicago at All Out was it All Out? Yeah, was one of the most incredible amount of fan support for a team winning. Like, they blew the roof off that building in those near fall. But Swerve and Our Glory ended up retaining, but that kind of established you claimed as the real deal.
Right. It was 9-4 at All Out that they really, again, they arrived. They got the chant. The fans got behind them, and everybody knew that they were an amazing team from that point forward. And then during that month, it was a couple weeks later at Arthur Ashe, they got the gold. And if TK was a little bit more adaptable, would he have done it mid-match? Sure. But AEW doesn't change match endings mid-match if they can help it.
Right.
Vince is famous for doing that. Once he did Montreal, he didn't give a fuck. He'd do it any time he thought he needed it.
Yeah.
But if that had happened in WWE and Vince had heard, yes, absolutely, the Acclaimed would have won that night. Absolutely. But Tony's still young, still a 3-year-old company. He's only been booking a few years. So, he's working on having that intuition, that intuitive feel to ride the audience and be able to get them to crest and just reach those heights. He's working on it. He had some opportunities with CM Punk. He had opportunities with FTR this year. He was able to capitalize a little bit with the Acclaimed. But when these, Hook's another example. They're reaching these heights, and then what?
Right.
And that's kind of
Right.
where Tony's big fault lies, where his area of improvement is. How do you get whoever it is to that next level? What is that next level?
And how do
Especially,
you keep him? How do you keep him there too? Like Wardlow
yeah,
during his feud with MJF was on fire. Like the crowd would go crazy for him. Thunder Rosa, when she won the title, had
hmm
a lot of crowd support too. Thunder fizzled, and she ended up getting hurt. And Wardlow just was not used in my opinion. He was not used in a way that allowed him to keep his momentum. And he even talked about it on air in the ring with the microphone because he wasn't booked to have any competitive matches.
yeah,
So
it was just squashes week after week. It was like, okay, that got him to a certain point, but after a while, come on.
and it's almost like Tony's thought is, okay, you had your time, it's time to cool you off, and someone else is gonna move on, so we got to cool you down a little bit. But I don't think I don't agree with that. I mean, if someone's hot, yeah, I feel like you want to milk them for all they're worth. I mean, you don't want to like feed your entire roster to them, but if the guy's popping the roof off the arena, keep
Yeah,
doing it.
yeah,
Keep them going.
yeah,
Gonna
exactly. And
make them work.
that's the one big criticism that I think I have for 2022. I think I have for AEW in general is learning to be able to get that rhythm with the audience and hearing them and realizing I need to make adjustments. I need to push these guys and then learning how to keep it sustaining because Jade's having the same problem. She's had a couple of good competitive matches, but in general, she's mostly squash matches.
Yep.
Wardlow, and then there've been a couple of others who've had that same problem, and then they just sort of cool off.
Right.
And that I think is Tony's booking, Tony's feel for the audience, and why he needs some of those veteran voices to help guide him to be able to sustain those levels because he's not there yet. And
Right.
the company as a whole isn't there yet. They've reached some amazing heights already. They've come within a hair's breadth of overcoming the flagship Raw show. I mean,
Right.
are you kidding me? In 3 years? So there's still huge potential. But 2022, to me, the story is potential wasted.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
so many of those, so many
Yeah.
examples. What were
I
you
think
saying?
the part of that too is the injury suspension list. Adam Cole,
Sure.
Andrade, Christian, Punk, Statlander, Kyle O'Reilly, Kenny, Bucks, House of Black, Bryan Danielson, Mox, Jericho, of course Cody. Um,
Miro. Miro
yeah,
was out a long time.
yep. Um, so I mean, a lot of the programs were completely derailed, and guys like the Bucks, instead of going against Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole
Yeah.
and Fish, Undisputed Era, they just sat around. They didn't really do anything. They just did whatever their backstage roles were and had a match every couple of weeks that didn't have any build.
And and
Um,
and their ability to adjust on the fly, to be able to adjust to the injuries is again the maturity of the booker, and that goes to it's still a very new company.
yeah, and I think I think they started after they signed CM Punk last year, and CM Punk was fighting, and then Brian and Adam Cole showed up. The ratings started catching up to Raw,
Yeah.
and and I think everyone was like, yeah, they're gonna pass because Raw was so bad at the time.
Yep.
Vince was running it, and Austin Theory and the Egg or whatever the hell he was spending 3 hours talking about.
Oh,
Um,
the egg.
so AEW, I thought, and even Jericho was saying like, yeah, we're gonna pass Raw, but then like people started getting hurt, guys started doing stupid shit like Punk, and they lost a ton of momentum. And Tony bought ROH. It turned into AEW presents Ring of Honor.
There was,
He started diluting the brand.
yeah.
Um, and it's definitely killed his not killed his ratings. His ratings are still good, and he's making a lot of money, and he's going to get a better TV deal. And he's been very successful, but he was not able to capitalize on that window to potentially surpass Raw.
I
Um,
agree. He lost the momentum, and that's again his big growing opportunity for 2022. What the rest of the year, the only thing that I could talk about would be the effects of All Out, the Brawl Out, and the return of the Elite, the return of his actual biggest stars,
right.
really in the company. And people are still talking about, will CM Punk come back? Is it
Yep.
possible for them to work together? Can they get over it? And here's my thing, because this is really the biggest story of the year for
Yep.
AEW, is the brawl out, is the
Yes.
fallout of these two huge stars, going at it. And I say two because the Elite as a unit versus CM Punk as his unit going at it is the biggest story in 2022 because it involved CM Punk, the biggest return of 2021, the biggest return of wrestling in God knows how long. I mean, literally today I watched his return at the first dance, and the emotion still comes through. The power that man has to connect to the people is still palpable, but he shat on that connection, and we'll see if they can recover. But the just the misstep of having Punk, and then he got injured and he lost the title, and then he got it back, and then he lost that whole thing, plus his tirade, plus the attack backstage, the suspension of the Elite, all of that culminated into massive rating, not massive, but into ratings drops, into cooling off not just that storyline, but the entire promotion cooled off because of that
Yeah.
event.
Yep. That, and it's like they tried to filling that gap with Ring of Honor, and AEW fans don't want to see that.
And that
A
was
lot
the
of
yeah, the
oh,
Ring of Honor stuff absolutely diluted it. And Tony Hurd, he's getting rid of them. He's putting them on their own show where they should be. He tried to get just Warner Brothers, didn't shop it to anybody else. Just Warner Brothers, they didn't want it. I assume he's going to try to package it together with Dynamite when they renew, and Rampage when they renew the AEW stuff coming up real soon. And that's, additional TV stuff. He's going to give it a discounted rate. He was trying to probably get a premium rate. He'll throw it together as a discount, get the premium for AEW because that's a proven commodity, and just build ROH the same. Get some Saturday night death slot or Sunday morning, whatever it is, wherever they're going to put ROH. And then have their online stuff, their Club of Honor or whatever it is, because that's huge. The online subscriptions are proven. He can sell that off to Peacock or whoever later, or even WB. And then he's got the potential TV and, the YouTube stuff. I think, yes, great. Ring of Honor, get its own stuff. Get away from AEW and then let AEW grow again. Let it be its own brand. Maybe bring in the titles every now and again, or for Joe, but just leave the brands separate. Absolutely most important.
why do you think he wasn't interested in shopping to other customers? There's a million TV stations. Someone would have bought it.
It has to do with corporate synergies and Having worked in the corporate world in the ways that I have, he wanted it with Warner Brothers to sink or swim with the one company. Trying to shop around if he wants to go streaming, now he's split between two masters. It's just there's so much going on because he wants not just broadcast TV, he wants streaming rights. And those streaming deals, he has to hitch his trailer to one of them, and right now that's Warner Brothers.
The Fed does it that way though. You got Raw on one station, USA, you got SmackDown on Fox, and SmackDown wants certain people on their show, and I don't know if USA cares.
They they do. They do still care.
So you just wonder that why wouldn't Tony kind of put some pressure on Warner? Or maybe he's afraid to, because he feels like if Warner drops him, that he could be in big trouble from a revenue standpoint. So I don't know.
Right. Well, part of it is right now he's got all his eggs in the same basket. He's got the YouTube stuff. He's got the Ring of Honor stuff streaming. He's playing a tightrope game. We don't have all the information that he does. And so I assume he's probably angling for a TV deal with Ring of Honor. He's probably packaging it with AEW saying it's separate, but give us an hour, something of that nature. He's got leverage because he's the number one draw. He's their biggest ratings on TNT and TBS. He's getting consistent, great number one, number two, top five. He's in there consistently, so he's got that leverage. The ad revenue's coming in, even though ad revenue is leaving as a whole out of television, so there's that. But in addition, he's still getting that ad revenue. He's still getting the eyes. I think he's just going to get 1 hour for Ring of Honor, and I think it'll be sufficient. Even if they do something stupid like 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, I think there'll be sufficient eyes to bring in for Ring of Honor plus the streaming. I think that's why he's angling for it. I think he's keeping it all together because he wants a streaming deal. You got to remember that Raw and Fox deals were done before streaming was a real thing. Yes, WWE was a leader in getting streaming set up with the network, with their own WWE network, but Vince never had a vision for it, never liked it, never wanted it, sold it off as soon as he could, and fired the people responsible to set it up. So he never believed that it should be its own thing, and he sold it off. That's where Nick Khan's first big deal came in, when they sold that off to Peacock. So
what a brilliant deal it was.
What a fucking deal it was, because then he bankrolled that into Saudi Arabia, and he bankrolled that into Fox. And now they're a multi-billion-dollar company. Nick Khan is the number one man along with Stephanie. I mean, that certainly turned out okay for him.
Yeah. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens when that 5-year deal for $1 billion with Peacock expires. Is that market going to hold up, or?
There's no way Fox is happy right now. There's no way Fox is happy. They've had a couple of spikes. But in general,
Fox. I mean Peacock for the right to the network.
Peacock's still getting plenty of streaming. They're still getting plenty of signups. I don't know what any of those numbers are. I certainly can look at the audience at SmackDown and the audience for Raw. There's no way USA's happy. And Fox, sure, it goes up and down, and it's been up a couple of times, and Bloodline's certainly doing well, but Bray's been a bust.
Yeah.
He really has. I was so excited. Nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing. So, when you're talking TV deals, AEW is a quarter of the cost at nearly the same ratings. They're not going anywhere. TBS and TNT are freaking happy. And do they bring in a package deal with ROH? Maybe. Tony's a businessman. I think he can present the numbers in such a way that they'll be happy to take the deal.
Yeah. I'm going to say they're about 60 to 75% of Raw's numbers and probably half of SmackDown, because SmackDown's on free TV on Fox. So that helps. You have access to so many more households with that.
Oh, yeah.
So. All
And
right.
let's move into predictions. Let's kind of see what we're going to see. And again, we're looking at AEW. We know the rest of the world's out there, but let's focus on this.
All right. Why don't you start, and then I'll do one next, and
Okay.
we can just go back and forth.
So my first big prediction, of course, starts with the world title. We already know this is not a difficult choice. Bryan Danielson comes back, and he and MJF put on a massive clinic of wrestling matches that just put MJF even further in the stratosphere because Bryan Danielson is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's being built up.
Yep.
I think with Brian saying, he signed his last full-time contract,
Yep.
that I think Brian's going to be in for the title. I think MJF's reign will end with Brian. Whether that happens before or after the whole bidding war of 24 thing, I don't know. I think that might be a reason to try and keep the title on MJF longer. But I feel like Brian needs a title run in AEW to kind of, to give the AEW title history that lineage, that name on
Sure.
that lineage. You
Sure.
want Brian to be the champion in AEW so that when people are looking at that title history 20 years from now, they can see Brian on there. I think that's huge.
You have a valid point, and maybe during the series Brian wins and then loses it back to MJF.
Yeah, that could happen too.
That to me, because I think MJF, I think 2023 is the year he holds it, and that kind of rolls into my second prediction, which is coming up. So you're next.
All right. So I had Brian beating MJF for the title as one of mine, and the second part of that prediction was Brian will lose the belt to Kenny Omega towards the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
I think that Brian versus Omega match, if they actually build up both guys as stars instead of having Brian job to people like Daniel Garcia. No offense to Daniel
Right.
Garcia, but your top guy isn't losing to Daniel Garcia in a sharpshooter or whatever.
Right.
So if they continue to build Brian up, and he has a strong year, beats MJF, I think that Kenny Omega Daniel Bryan match could be incredible.
Now, see, if they put the belt on Brian, I would love to see another Omega match with him, but Brian wins. Because again, I think it goes back to MJF.
Okay.
Now that goes into my second prediction, which is Max loses the belt to Ricky Starks before the end of the year. Because I don't know about the rest of the year. I don't know if he loses it, gets it back, whatever. I think Max will lose the belt to Ricky before the end of the year, before 2023. I think Ricky Starks, this becomes his year to be built up as the new champion.
Yeah, I am not a Ricky Starks fan.
Okay.
So, however, I know there are a lot of people who are. I don't see Ricky Starks winning the title just yet.
Oh, he's too young. He's far too young. He's not Max by any means.
He had a great interview on Max. That shoot interview, which I think elevated Ricky Starks quite a bit. I think he's copying The Rock, and it's kind of obvious. But who can blame him? So
he gets that comparison. I don't think it's fair. I think they gave him an opportunity to show off his skills a couple of times recently, and he's come through each time. And I think that's going to give him the opportunity. Oh, he's way too young. He definitely doesn't deserve it. I'm putting this out there just because I do that. But that's my really big outlier. I really think that Ricky Starks is going to get his breakthrough year, and he's going to get a title run. It won't be long, but I think he will get it, and I think he's going to beat Max for it.
All right. Good deal. We shall see.
All right, what's your next one?
My next pick is Sasha Banks is going to show up and fight in AEW.
Okay.
I think with this New Japan stuff she has going on, she's going to transition over to AEW. Whether or not she signs, I don't know. She can do whatever the hell she wants. So if she doesn't want to fight full time, then Tony may not be interested in tossing a ton of money at her if she doesn't want to sign a longer term deal. But I do think she fights for AEW in 23.
Now, it's funny. My next prediction is not Sasha, but I'll bring her up because she was absolutely in my list. She does show up. She is Soraya's tag partner. but she's not signed to AEW. She's NJPW talent. She's New Japan talent.
Yeah.
I think she stays in Japan for about a year. She does all she needs to in Japan, and I think she comes back to the States. Now, does she come back to WWE and demand the money, or does she come to AEW because she's been working with them as a New Japan talent, sort of like the other exchanges, like Ishii and all the others that we've seen recently, where
Yeah.
New Japan just loans her out, and AEW's happy to host her, because obviously, and then she's still their talent for the year. I think
Yeah.
after that, she'll probably sign to AEW. But I agree. I think she's going to be New Japan talent for a year, and she's going to show up on AEW to blow the roof off because they can.
Yeah.
That was not my
Right.
next prediction, but I agree with you.
All right.
Now,
All right. So let's hear your next one.
here's my next big prediction, and that's Danhausen. He's going to go on a big winning streak, show he can actually wrestle, and that he can win. But then he goes on a big losing streak, and he starts to get really dark and really serious. He breaks up with the best friends, and he becomes evil, as opposed to just evil, very nice, very evil. He's just very evil. And he becomes the Darkhausen. He becomes Dark Danhausen. He's no longer comedy. He's not a super heavyweight by any means, but he's sort of like Darby Allin, where he's just in there. He's a scrapper, and he's a serious fighter. I absolutely don't believe a word of that, but the fact is, that's my prediction.
I'd love to see Danhausen pushed. I loved his little angle where he came out as angry Danhausen
Yeah.
and kicked some ass.
Yeah, I liked
think
that.
there's a lot of potential there. One of the things I thought was interesting was AEW came out with Christmas ornaments this year.
Mm-hmm.
There's CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
There was Young Bucks, Sting, a couple other guys. I went through each of those ornaments, and the only one that was sold out was Danhausen.
Yep. He's got a huge following. He's definitely,
Danhausen,
he's popular.
he is very popular. Danhausen transcends the business. There are non-wrestling fans that have asked me about him.
Yep.
He's got a ton of, he's very entertaining. The guy's hilarious.
When he puts it all together, when they put some serious push behind him, he's going to explode. His appeal is so unique that once you get him, you love him.
Wouldn't it be great if he had some crazy program with Hook where they actually let the guys fight like a 15-minute real match, and let those guys go all out? It'd be just so much fun to watch.
Nice. Yeah. I think there's so many opportunities. Danhausen's so young. He's so charismatic. He knows. He already tried the super evil part and it didn't get over. That's where the whole very nice, very evil came from. I can't wait to see him go dark and serious and just start tearing people apart and then do the tooth spot. There's just so many little things that I can't wait for. I think 2023 is the year for it. Let's go Danhausen.
All right. My next prediction is the bidding war of 2024.
Sure.
MJF is going to choose Impact. I mean AEW. I meant to say AEW. So MJF is going to choose AEW, and in my opinion, he's already extended. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the big Burberry belt. So
now that's something I think we've talked about before. I also think he's extended. I think this whole bidding war of 2024 is complete garbage. I think there's absolutely no chance he leaves AEW. I think maybe 25, 26, he might go free agent, but by that point, Tony's solidified him. He's crossovered. He's already starting to act. He's not going anywhere. There's no way. Just can't.
Yep.
All right, my next big one is kind of a wish fulfillment, and that is FTR wins the title and stays. They re-sign with AEW. Realistically, that may or may not happen, and I'll get into that in a second. But the Acclaim, I don't want them to break up. They're going to stay together for many, many, many years. They might do heel turns, face turns, whatever. I want them to stay as a team. I want them to keep Billy Gunn. I want them to just stay as that trio. Don't fuck with it. let them be popular, let them cut their promos, and just be champions sometimes, not champions other times, and it shouldn't matter at all. They should be this generation's popularity DX-wise. And as far as FTR, if they leave, most likely, I think they're going to go on a Matt Cardona spree. I think they're going to go to all the independents, to Japan, Mexico, Canada, wherever they want to go. And I think they're going to get belts everywhere. I think they're just going to raise their stock for any company that they choose. WWE needs them for their tag team division the way AEW needed them. AEW doesn't need them anymore. I'd love to see them stick around. I'd love to see them as champions, but they don't have that same level of need that WWE has. Plus, Papa H, he'll bring them back. The whole thing with Road Dogg, it doesn't matter. If they want to go back to WWE, I think they take a year off, maybe longer, build up their stock, and then come back as heroes, no matter who they sign with.
Yeah, I don't think FTR signs with WWE. I don't think they re-sign with AEW either. They had a great year. They started out so strong. And now Tony Khan has them in a losing streak, and they lost to the Gun Club, and they've lost 3 matches in a row, and now they may even lose their AAA titles in Mexico. It could be their 4th loss in a row, because I think that's their next upcoming match.
And Tony has the book on that.
And then they're at Wrestle Kingdom defending, and they could lose again. They could lose 5 straight to close out. Well, it would be next year, and Wrestle Kingdom is January 4th. So, but yeah, it's just tough to see. I hate to see guys who are up for Wrestler of the Year all of a sudden have a losing streak in December. I just don't like that at all. I feel it kind of shits on their accomplishments during the year. There's no reason they couldn't have waited a month before they started jobbing them out. And to me, that's almost it seems, I don't know. It just seems kind of a shitty move to have them losing matches in December after the year they've had. So yeah, I don't think they're going to re-sign with AEW. I don't think they're going to go back to WWE. Dax likes spending time with his family.
Yep.
I listened to his podcast yesterday. He made that very clear.
Oh yeah, and he just started a podcast, which we know in WWE is not allowed. So all signs indicate they're not going to WWE, even if they don't re-sign. Absolutely.
If WWE offered me $500,000 to go work for them, I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't want to give up this podcast.
Yeah, we're definitely getting the same amount of viewers as Dax.
I'm sure you feel the same way.
I totally feel that way. I would not take $500,000. Fuck no. Piss on that.
Neither of us would ever abandon the Elite Mark Order. We are emo for life.
For life. All right.
That's right.
So I think that was that mine? With FDR?
Yeah, I think
it was you're next.
So this one is, I think, probably super interesting for me, who's been following the Elite through New Japan and ROH back in the day. So Kota Ibushi is going to show up in AEW. I don't think he'll sign, but he's going to show up in AEW for some work. And he'll be in a program with the Elite, with Kenny Omega as the Golden Lovers.
Of course.
And Takeshita is going to be involved.
Oh.
So Don Callis has kind of been watching Takeshita on the dark matches, and
right.
There's something going on there. Don Callis has also been watching and taking note of Will Ospreay. So there's something huge is going to go down. Kenny's fighting Will Ospreay at Wrestle Kingdom in a week from now, which should be a 6-star match minimum, I would think. It'll be the best match we've seen in a long time. I think for me, match of the year was, and I think we should probably do an award show, maybe next week. But match of the year to me was Okada versus Ospreay, and I think Omega Ospreay next week might have a chance to top that. But anyhow, I see Ibushi coming over. I see Kenny getting more of that New Japan stuff involved, especially now that Ibushi is free of New Japan. And Takeshita is full-time AEW. I think there's going to be some really cool stuff there.
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity for a lot of New Japan crossover. I think that's part of what Sasha's doing. So do I see that possibility? Absolutely, yes. I would love to see all of these different stars interacting. I don't know the Japanese stars nearly as well as you do, but I will tell you that the ones that I have seen show up in AEW have been phenomenal. So, yeah, I'm excited to see more of that. We know there's going to be another Forbidden Door, so they're still working together. I think that might be where we see Sasha for the second time. The first time will be in early January with Saraya, and I think there'll be another Forbidden Door match with her because, again, I think she's New Japan. But I agree. I think there's a lot of great matches coming down the line, and all the Japanese people, obviously Kenny wants to bring them in because he's worked with them for years and he knows them. And Don Callis has an eye for talent.
Yes, he does.
So let's see where that goes. Now, this is my last prediction. It's probably my most serious prediction.
Oh.
Yeah, real serious. Put your serious hat on. And it's about Eddie Kingston. And I think along with Bryan Danielson, I think Eddie Kingston's going to have a good long sequence of matches with MJF for the title. I don't think he wins. Eddie's going to lose, and it's going to send him into a spiral. Now, this is going to be for television. He's not going to actually spiral. But
you never know with him.
That's the problem. You don't. But this is going to be on camera, so I'm pretty sure it won't be real. Okay. But they're going to show him just getting worse and worse, maybe even show him drinking or evidence of him drinking, like him not actually drinking, but evidence thereof. And he just spirals down. And then the last thing that keeps him from going over the edge is a kitten. And I think a kitten. And so I think the kitten is going to become his new mascot. And it's a fierce kitten who just won't give up. He's like, this little alley cat kitten that he finds as he's wiped out. He's like, man, if this cat can pull it out, I'm going to pull it out. And so the kitten becomes like his mascot. And furries around the world start cosplaying as Kitten Eddie Kingston. And I think that's going to be his new thing, is he's going to be the Kitten Eddie Kingston. That'll be his new gimmick, and it'll be him and this little cat.
Eddie the Furry Kingston.
Yeah.
I can see it now.
Yes. And he's going to come out in the makeup with the ears, little cat tail out the back. He's totally going to buy into the entire thing, and he will be Kitten Eddie Kingston, and he'll fight Lee Johnson in Tyga style all the time, and he'll leave the mask on. It'll be a kitten versus a Tyga.
Good deal.
Like I said, super serious. So you got to take that with every grain of salt you've got.
So I don't know if I can match the seriousness of that one, Eddie the Kitten Kingston. But my last prediction, I'll jumble three together because two of them are pretty quick. So Nick Wayne's going to appear.
Yeah.
In 2023, he's going to turn 18, and it'll be really interesting to see how he's used.
Versus Action Andretti.
No,
Andretti's going to put him over.
Yeah, I mean, he should. I can't imagine Jericho putting over Nick Wayne in Nick Wayne's first match.
Right.
As an 18-year-old. But I hope Nick Wayne finds a good mentor and someone to protect him as he enters this world. Because it's not easy for an 18-year-old to move into the locker room. I mean, it's probably a lot easier now than it was. Maybe Nick's playing the same video games as a lot of these guys, but people take advantage of you.
Yep.
So I hope that Nick Wayne has some protection in AEW. The other thing is I would like to see Billy Starks get signed. She just turned 18, had her first match on Dark last night. It was finally aired. And hopefully there's good things in her future. She's a tremendous talent. And to finish off my prediction is Wardlow signs with WWE next year. I cannot find anything to suggest what his contract status might be. But he signed in 2019 to what I would think is a 3-year deal. So he has, unlike MJF, has kept his contract stuff really quiet. Like, he doesn't talk about it at all.
Right.
And Tony doesn't either. So I think it's a possibility that Wardlow is going to be the one that gets away next year, similar to Cody last year.
I mean, first of all, I think we missed an opportunity with the Mad Kitten. I had to get that in there. Mad Kitten Eddie Kingston. I think 2023. It's that year. Him and Danhausen. I think your point about Wardlow is on target. I think he would massively stand to improve in WWE. I think it would benefit him hugely out of almost anybody. He fits the old Vince 6 foot plus, built like a shit brick house.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
Triple H also knows how to tap into. He does have a connection with the fans already. He does have talent. He can do high flying stuff, and he's a big hoss. So I think Triple H can see the talent in him and utilize him in a way that he hasn't been, because yes, AEW's building stars, they're young, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that WCW failed to do was build new stars.
Yep.
And if AEW can build stars on the level that they can keep building them and keep building them, then they stand a chance. WWF is where you go if you want to be a star, though. And that's always been true for many years. And
all right.
All right. I guess that's our prediction for the year.
So I just want to mention a couple more things before we wrap up. I think it would be fun to do like a recap show where we recap the top matches of the year, and then maybe talk about the pay-per-views. We get into each of those, or maybe more detail around the title reigns. We could like talk about each of the title reigns and how things went. You know, who was a good champ, who was a bad champ, who elevated the title, who didn't.
You know what? I think our listeners should comment and tell us what they want to hear. All three of them. All three of them. Your mother, my mother, and the cat.
We're hitting 20 views on YouTube, so
woohoo!
We're gonna get some momentum going, and also we may start trying to recruit some other people to help out with the Elite Mark orders. So there's definitely more to come. So talking about our future show, we might want to recap Dynamite after tomorrow night, but the one last question I wanted to ask, and we can both chime in on it before we close out, is probably the biggest question. Does CM Punk return next year?
Okay.
What do you think?
In my heart of hearts, I'm still a CM Punk fan. In my heart of hearts, I'm still going to play as CM Punk in Fight Forever. I don't care. I just don't care. CM Punk is still a phenomenal wrestler. I don't care that he's old and he's broken and he's going to get hurt his first match back. I absolutely don't care. I want to see him back. Do I think that the Young Bucks and Kenny work it out? I'm going to say yes, just to be optimistic. Yes, absolutely. He comes back and they have yet another sold-out arena with CM Punk fan chants. Only this time it's fuck CM Punk. And then it's fuck the Elite. And they have dueling chants that are just as loud as the CM Punk return from 2021 chants. They would be stupid not to somehow bring him in. But we're talking egos and we're talking legal. And I don't know if both can be overcome. But I'm going to go with yes.
Okay. I'm going to say no. CM Punk is not going to come back. He didn't get his way, so he took his toys and put them away and went home. And just like he did with WWE, and he'll never come back as long as the Elite are around. He might work for Tony again, but he may also resent Tony that Tony didn't fire the Elite and strip them of all creative or whatever their responsibilities are that CM Punk had a problem with. So I don't see him coming back. Some of the things I read were people were surprised he lasted as long as he did in AEW before quitting.
They were haters. They were haters. They were just CM Punk haters. And you know what? The fact is, there were people who were always going to say CM Punk was never going to work out. But I believe in that first CM Punk that showed up in AEW after 7 years, where he said he's got the time and he's got the stories and he wants to work with the kids. I believe in him. I don't know, dude. I'm just praying that it comes back because he really shot the bed hard. And
yeah, it's really
from a corporate position. There's no way. He's toxic. He's fucking nuclear radioactive. But from a wrestling perspective, that's good money to be made.
It is. It is. There's a lot of money to be made.
So,
All right. I think that will do it. And yeah, hopefully, I won't be sick again and have to miss a couple weeks, and we can get another podcast out hopefully later this week.
we're also past the holiday season, really. So now we
That
should be able to
that's
really
true.
start, getting them produced and be consistent and build
Yep.
up that audience. And don't forget, people, join the Elite Mark Order over at elitemarkorder.com. You can join the the subscription newsletter, because we've released hundreds of newsletters before now. You definitely don't want to lose out on any of the new breaking news, like Jay's once again snowed in, or uh, one of us has gotten sick. Those are important breaking news items over at
That's right.
elitemarkorder.com.
Right.
And join the Discord.
All right. And maybe we'll do something like Brian Alvarez does with the Wrestling Observer podcast. We could have one where we do trivia, and if you miss a trivia question, you have to do a shot, and things can just kind of go downhill from there. So that might be interesting.
All right, we'll figure something out. I'm definitely on game for something similar.
All right. All right. Thanks to all of our dozen listeners, and talk to you later, Scott.
See ya.